The silence weighs like lead. The door creaks open and Malika takes a step forward. A vast hall, eyes hidden in the shadows, presences judging her soul. There is no escape, no mercy. The castle wants her last breath, but Malika won't surrender. Not now. Between damnation and freedom, she must run, even if it means facing something far worse. But what if the real nightmare hasn't even begun? Watch until the end, if you dare. Chapter 7. The Final Judgment. The door creaked open, revealing a vast hall bathed in a soft, almost ethereal light. But it was not a welcoming light. It was cold, impersonal, as if merely waiting for the next condemned soul to cross its threshold. A shiver ran down Malika's spine, but her determination held firm. She had made it this far, and she would not surrender now. She was closer than ever, but she knew the worst challenge of her life still awaited her. The hall was immense, with towering stone pillars stretching up to the ceiling, disappearing into the shadows. At its center stood a long table, adorned with flickering candles that cast trembling light. Seated around the table were hooded figures, their presence emanating an indescribable authority. Their eyes, hidden beneath the shadow of their hoods, glowed with a supernatural intensity. They were the judges, the entities that decided the fate of every soul that entered this place. Malika stopped in the middle of the hall, her heartbeat racing, fear tightening around her throat. She didn't know what to expect, but something deep inside warned her. This was the point of no return. The judges did not move. They simply watched her, their presence weighing down on her like an invisible force. The silence was crushing, broken, only by the sound of her ragged breathing. Malika tried to steady herself, but her hands were clammy, her knees trembling. The images of everything she had endured in that infernal castle haunted her, and she knew the moment approaching was not just a judgment of her soul, but of everything she had done, of the choices she had made. Finally, a voice echoed through the hall, deep and commanding.
Malika, are you aware of what you have done?
The voice seemed to come from all directions, reverberating in her ears.
You have surrendered to rage, to pain, to fear. Your soul is marked by all you have endured, but more than that, it has been forged by your actions, by the choices you made in life. Your vengeance, your bitterness, have made you a prisoner of your own existence. Now it is time to pay the price.
The words struck Malika like a heavy blow, and she felt as if she were being crushed under an invisible weight. The pain, the suffering, the horrors of the past days, all of it returned to her in a whirlwind. She wanted to scream, to beg for forgiveness, but she knew it would not change what was coming. There would be no escape, no redemption. She was already condemned. One of the hooded figures slowly rose from the table. Its presence felt even more imposing as it approached. Malika could not see its face, but she knew this entity was the one to deliver her sentence. The figure extended its hand, and a stream of scarlet light formed in the air, wrapping around Malika in an unrelenting grip. She struggled, but it was useless. The light would not let her move. It was as if her very essence was being drained, as if the pain she carried had now become her eternal prison.
Your soul is like a chalice of bitterness,
the judge said, its voice cold as death.
You have been corrupted by your own darkness. Now you shall face the punishment that is due.
Malika felt her body weaken, her mind clouding. But deep inside, something refused to accept this fate. She had lived so long with rage and pain that a part of her still believed she deserved something more. She didn't know what she would do next, but she could not let this be the end. Not while there was still a chance to fight. She took a deep breath, feeling the scarlet light tightening around her chest. Then, in a moment of desperation, she screamed, not out of fear, but out of sheer will to live. Something in her soul rebelled against this condemnation, something even she didn't understand. But the flame of survival had been ignited, and, with all the strength she had left, she lunged forward, shattering the bonds of light. The room suddenly blazed with an explosion of energy. The impact sent the figures around her reeling, and Malika felt a surge of power flood her body. She didn't know what was happening, but everything around her seemed to be collapsing. The walls of the hall began to crack, and the judges, now fully visible, appeared to be losing control. Malika didn't think, she simply acted. She sprinted toward the iron door that had opened before her mind in chaos but her body driven by a primal force. The fear, the horror, the anguish, all of it faded as she neared the door. She knew somehow that she was getting closer to the truth. With a primal scream, she crossed the threshold and was swallowed by darkness once again. Chapter 8. The last breath of freedom. Malika had no idea how long she had been running. Time felt suspended, a distortion between reality and nightmare. Everything around her was darkness, only the sound of her hurried footsteps echoing through the castle's endless corridors. The air was thick, saturated with the unbearable stench of decay, but something inside her had changed. She was beyond fear, beyond despair. Something new, something deeper had awakened within her soul. Iron doors swung open and slammed shut behind her, but Malika refused to stop. Not anymore. The feeling of being pursued, watched by horrendous creatures and relentless judges had never left her, but now she didn't care. Every step was a fight for her survival, for her freedom, for the chance to escape this eternal hell. Adrenaline pulsed through her veins. Her breath was ragged, her muscles burned with exhaustion, but she couldn't stop. She knew that if she did, she would never have another chance to leave. The castle was trying to swallow her again, like a predator closing in on its prey. But Malika was determined never to be captured again. She ran through another narrow corridor and found herself before a set of staircases, shifting erratically up and down as if they were traps designed to imprison her. She hesitated for a brief moment, but the voice in her mind was clear. There was no choice. If she wanted to escape, it had to be now. The stairs were the only way. Malika climbed quickly, ignoring the danger, ignoring the impossible movements of the steps beneath her feet. Her only thought was to get out. The rotating stairs tossed her from side to side, but she pushed forward. Every twist and turn took her farther from the castle, from the nightmare, from the damnation waiting for her below. Above, a faint light flickered, signaling the proximity of an exit. It was weak, but it shone just enough for Malika to see a small window. The gargoyles, the castle's guardian creatures, still circled above, but she had made up her mind. She couldn't hesitate now. The gargoyles grunted constantly, so Malika watched their flight attentively. They soared and vanished, and from time to time, they passed close to the window where she stood. She could hear them because of their grunts. Malika thought she had nothing to lose. She would throw herself from the tower, mount a gargoyle, and see what happened next. But one thing was certain. She would not stay there any longer. Malika said, "If necessary, I'll die and sacrifice myself for my own sake." And so it was. The creatures had found her and were about to capture her when the gargoyles signaled their approach. At that moment, driven by an impulse, a response of fight, grit, and escape, fueled by adrenaline, Malika threw herself. She leapt from the staircase and hurled herself toward the window. There was no more room for fear, no more time to think. She had endured so much torture, so many threats, that she no longer cared what would happen next. Either she escaped, or she would be trapped there forever. As she jumped, Malika landed on top of a gargoyle, which let out a deafening grunt and soared upward at full speed into the vast nothingness before flinging her beyond those gates, out of that cursed castle. She felt immense pressure and blacked out. As she slowly regained consciousness, an overwhelming sensation of freedom washed over her. Malika felt the cutting wind against her face, the night's cold enveloping her body. She was outside, far from those accursed walls, far from the creatures that hunted her. For the first time in a long while, she felt alive. However, she was soon overcome by a sensation of vertigo. The air around her seemed to shift in shape, and the stars in the sky began to distort. Malika didn't understand what was happening, but she felt herself being pulled, as if reality were unraveling around her. In one last gasp of panic, she found herself falling into the void. At that moment, everything went dark. Chapter 9. The end of the nightmare. Malika awoke in a completely different place. The air was fresh, as if she had been transported to another world. There was no smoke, no pain. Only an unsettling peace surrounded her. She lay still, her eyes fixed on a metallic ceiling that reflected a strange, soft light. For a moment, she had no idea where she was. Her senses were dulled as if she were still in a dream, or worse, in the limbo between life and death. When she tried to get up, she realized she was in a confined yet comfortable space, a sort of space shuttle. She could no longer smell the gases or the nauseating stench of decay from the castle. She looked around, trying to understand what was happening. Her mind was still dazed from the horrors she had endured, but something was different. Something inside her had changed. With effort, she sat up and touched her forehead, feeling the cold metal. A strange metallic hum resonated from all around her, and when she looked outside, she noticed the walls surrounding her resembled the interior of a ship, a vehicle of some kind, unfamiliar to her. The disorientation was immediate, but then a soft voice echoed in her mind, a whisper, as if calling to her from some distant place.
You are no longer in the castle. You are no longer in the prison. You are free.
These words echoed in her head, like a command, an undeniable truth. Malika glanced around, trying to process them. She was free? But how could that be possible? How had she escaped that place? Her body still trembled, her hands were sweating, but there was no more pain, no more screams. She was alone somewhere, but somewhere strange and safe. She looked again through the window, and the sight of infinity left her speechless. The vast, dark emptiness stretched before her, but instead of horror, Malika felt an unfamiliar sense of freedom. She was in space. That's what it seemed like. She was traveling somewhere far away from the hell she had known. With every passing minute, the vision before her became clearer. The nothingness she had once feared, the void of space, now seemed to be her only chance at a new beginning. Her body still pulsed with adrenaline, but the pain of the castle had faded. Something inside her was at peace, as if she had finally found her path. Yet the silence around her was not absolute. She could vaguely hear a distant hum of engines, as if she were being carried somewhere beyond her understanding. But the strangest thing was that no matter how hard she tried to remember what had happened, how she had ended up there, she couldn't. Everything seemed to have unraveled, as if the castle and all the creatures that had tormented her were nothing more than a distant memory, a nightmare dissolving before her eyes. Still, something in her mind refused to fade, something that unsettled her deeply. Malika closed her eyes for a moment, trying to shake off the feeling, but it wouldn't go away. On the contrary, it grew inside her. A voice, a persistent whisper, the same voice that had echoed in her mind before.
This is not the end. This is only the beginning.
She shook her head, trying to dismiss the thought, but she couldn't. Something was wrong. Something was coming. Whatever it was, Malika knew she was not free. The nightmare, despite her escape from the castle, was not over. Something else awaited her, and in that moment the universe stretched before her, vast and cold like an endless field. Fear consumed her once more, but now it was no longer the castle, nor the creatures. It was something new, something beyond her comprehension. With one final impulse, Malika gazed into the abyss and threw herself into the void. The void stretches before Malika, infinite, cold, silent. She escaped the castle, broke chains that seemed unbreakable, survived horrors no human being should ever endure. But now, she stands before the unknown. The space around her is too calm, too quiet, as if the entire universe is holding its breath, as if something is waiting, watching. What lies on the other side? Freedom? Or just another step into the abyss? She feels the weight of the air around her, a silence that seems to scream, a void that feels like it's ready to consume her. What if the castle was just an illusion, a test? What if the real prison never had walls? Because there are prisons made of stone and darkness, but there are also those built inside the mind. Invisible traps, woven from hope and despair. After all, the worst illusion someone can live in is believing they've escaped when, in reality, they never left. Malika may have won a battle, but has she won the war? Or is the real horror only just beginning? And now, I ask you, if you were in her place, would you have taken that step into the unknown? Would you have trusted the promise of freedom, or hesitated, expecting the worst? Comment below. I want to know, how far would you go to escape? And what would you be willing to face for the simple will to survive? But before you leave, if you think Malika has found peace, you might want to think again. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications, because when the next story is told, you'll want to be here to hear it. But I warn you, what comes next may be even darker than anything you've seen before. And when the shadows move once more, when the next door creaks open, will you have the courage to step through? I'll see you in the next episode. That is, if you dare to return.